Ladies and gentlemen, let's move along with an evening of awards, of inspiring and inspirational and knowledgeable words. And let's begin with Dr. Lynn Bondurant for a special presentation. Lynn is the Educational Program Officer at NASA Lewis Research Center, coordinator of the Youth and Teacher Seminars, and a great asset to our hosts as a member of the coordinating committee. Lynn?
You know, one doesn't have to look back too many years to realize the impact that artists have had on generating enthusiasm for space. For example, take the cartoons of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. And therefore, it's no surprise that NASA's second administrator, James Webb, brought the NASA Fine Arts program into being in 1962. You see, technology had caught up with imagination. Tonight, it's my pleasure on behalf of the Midwest Space Development Conference to present an award to Bob Schulman for his outstanding contributions to the NASA Fine Arts program. Bob retired last May as director of the NASA Fine Arts program and curator of the art collection, a position he held from 1975 through 1994. His awards include the first Presidential Award for Design Excellence at NASA and the Gold Medal Award for Art Direction from the Society of Illustrators in New York. During his tenure as director of the Fine Arts program, he has literally worked with hundreds of artists who were selected to participate in the Fine Arts program, including Jane R. Bloom, who you heard this evening. Bob was also responsible, if you've ever been down to KSC, for the establishment of the art gallery down at Cape Kennedy, which displays the largest space art collection in the world. In addition, he was responsible for the Teacher in Space logo. I don't know if you've ever seen the Teacher in Space patch. He was responsible for the NASA's Apollo's 25th anniversary logo and the shuttle program insignia. And tonight, each one of you were given a portfolio of some Hubble space art, and Bob was also responsible for putting that together. You know, I could go on and on about his contributions, but it's also important to realize that in 50, 100, or 200 years from now, when residents of that future time admire the history of space as captured through the different artistic creations, especially those highlighting the shuttle era, will be viewing a legacy generated through the outstanding leadership of Bob Schulman. Bob, would you come up, please? I hope you'll all take a chance to look at it. It says, presented to Bob Schulman, curator of the NASA Art Program 1975 to 1994. As guardian of our national treasure, you were instrumental in preserving artwork that told the story of our achievements in space. Thank you for your legacy to our future, the Midwest Space Development Corporation, 1995.
Let me just say a few words. First of all, this is overwhelming. I don't know where they got some of these photographs that were taken on location, but I sure changed over the years. But this is really incredible with the Teacher in Space patch. and some of the paintings and all the artists that worked on these things, we've become good friends over the years. It wasn't just NASA official and contractor. Anyway, I want to thank you all for this wonderful tribute, but I must say that I owe a debt of gratitude to NASA for giving me the opportunity to work with some of the country's top artists, like Bob McCall and Paul Calley and Robert Rauschenberg and people of that nature, and many others that I can't even begin to tell you. So that was just to name a few. NASA also opened the doors to incredible technology and space events for me and my art teams, from launch activities at Kennedy Space Center to Johnson Space Center astronaut activities to unique art assignments at Lewis Research Center, Langley and Marshall. And I knocked on the doors very hard to get that access. It wasn't just with a smile saying, come in. It was beating down a lot of doors. But if you have a good program and it's not a big chunk of the budget, you can pretty well make it successful. So I had that going for me. Not a lot of money being spent on that. Most of the art was done on honorariums. And so I must thank NASA for that access. It was this kind of agency support that made the NASA art program a successful endeavor. A special thanks to, beside the agency, special thanks to the National Space Society, to this 14th annual conference, and also to my friend Lynn Bondurant for all the years of encouragement that he has given me when things looked a little down. I always heard from him, and things like that keep you going. So I want to thank you all, and Godspeed to everyone. Thank you.
Our congratulations to Bob. Next, let me introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Peter Diamandis. Peter currently serves as the chairman of the X Prize Foundation, no relation to a Friday night popular NBC program. Or is there? The truth is out there. A nonprofit organization promoting the formation of space-related prizes. He is also one of the 3 founders and a trustee of the International Space University, where he served as the university's first managing director. He was the founder and first chairman of the Students for the Exploration and Development of Space. In 1989, he formed International Microspace, Inc., a commercial launch company, and served as the CEO. Peter received degrees in aerospace engineering from MIT and a doctorate in medicine from the Harvard Medical School. He has conducted research in a number of fields, including molecular genetics, space medicine, and launch vehicle design. Maybe the definition of a Renaissance man, eh? A recipient of MIT's Kresge Award, the 1986 Space Industrialization Fellowship Award, and the 1988 Aviation Week and Space Technology Laurel, among many others. My great pleasure to introduce our friend, Dr. Peter Diamandis.
It's indeed an honor to speak here at the NSS conference. NSS has truly become a representing organization of the people of the United States. Before I get started, I'd like to take a quick poll of the audience here. I'd like all of those individuals, if you'd indulge me here, who are interested someday in flying into space, to please stand up. This is also your mid-term stretch, so get it out, stretch those legs. There you go, great. Wow, a lot of you want to fly in space. That's great to see. Enthusiasm beyond belief. I'd like to open up my presentation with a poem by Robert Service called Men That Don't Fit In. There's a race of men who don't fit in, a breed that can't sit still. So they break the hearts of kith and kin, and they roam the world at will. They range the field and they rove the flood, and they climb the mountain's crest. Theirs is the curse, the gypsy blood. They don't know how to rest. That's one of my favorite poems, and perhaps one of yours. If it wasn't, perhaps it will become. This is a poem of passion, of adventure, of enthusiasm, of the gypsy blood of people who don't know how to sit still. When I look around the room here tonight, I don't see necessarily space enthusiasts. I see explorers, people who don't fit into the, quote, status quo that we have out there in the world. A group of people who, if this were the 15th or 16th century, might be gathered around here instead of talking about space, speaking instead about flying, about crossing the oceans, or looking at other continents. We are, deep in our hearts, explorers. We have in each of us what I like to call the exploration gene, some type of a genetic phenotype that makes us different perhaps than other people, a drive to go and explore, to take those risks, to find out what life will be like on Mars or in zero-G. We thirst for the unknown. And in fact, we are very lucky as people, for we have chosen perhaps the greatest of adventures to pursue, moving out into the cosmos. So just maybe each of us has a little bit of something in common with that poem that Robert Service wrote about the explorers that he spoke about a century or two back. But then there's something very different. What's different between you and myself and the explorers that Robert Service spoke about is that our frontier is just beyond our individual grasp right now. We can't walk out there and go and make a decision. Not yet, at least. A half a millennium ago, prophetically, Leonardo da Vinci wrote, "Once you have tasted flight, you will always walk with your eyes turned skyward. For there you have been, and there you will always be." How sad it was that Da Vinci never had a chance to go and fly in the machines that he designed. They could have worked. Instead, he ended up having to dream about it and just watch the birds. How about you and me out here in this room? Will we be equally satisfied to just dream about the machines we design on paper? Never to go and experience spaceflight ourselves? To become space voyeurs rather than space doers? Because that's what we are right now. All of us here, unfortunately, except for a few select few, we have been watching and living space second and third hand. And we should not and cannot be satisfied with that. We must go and must demand to go. Tonight I'd like to speak about a serious threat to our love of space. The popularity of space, as many of you know, is going down. It's not something that's artificial, it's real. People are starting to care less and less about space. Why? Because it really has become a distant second or third hand experience. People are turning out to virtual worlds and virtual networks to get their exploration kicks. In fact, we have a U.S. science advisor telling us we should send telepresence robots to the moon instead of going there ourselves. Humanity has never succeeded by taking the safe road or the artificial road. We have to do it ourselves. Live that experience. Nearly 4 centuries after Da Vinci wrote his quote, in 1901, Wilbur Wright said, "If you are looking for perfect safety, you will do well to sit on that fence and watch the birds. If you really want to learn how to fly, you must mount the machine and learn of its tricks and actual trials." We also need to mount that machine and explore our frontier. It's time that we, each and every one of us, stop being space voyeurs and start being space adventurers. We should not and cannot be happy with status quo. We become accustomed to our government as the only mechanism for exploring space, and that's wrong. Governments have always supported exploration. They pay the bills and they build the ships, but it's been people who explore. It was Columbus, not Spain. It was Lewis and Clark, not the US government. Only an individual can take the risk and have the perseverance to go out there and make it happen. It's time that we start acting on our own. And instead of going to the government saying, please do this, start saying, let's do it ourselves. In fact, it was one of the founders of National Space Institute who wrote, "Don't tell me that man doesn't belong out there. Man belongs wherever he wants to go, and he'll do damn well when he gets there." And that was Wernher von Braun, for whom Maxwell will be winning the prize later. During the heydays of space, von Braun was really making the program rock, or rocket, in one way or another. And he died not knowing which way things would go. Would they end up in an abysmal state of disarray, or would his dreams of Mars and Moon and beyond go on? Well, 25 years later, we're asking ourselves what's gone wrong and how do we fix it? And in fact, how do we take back control from individuals who weigh our frontier against urban housing budgets? This is a question I'd like to discuss, and perhaps we can answer tonight. We all know that the government and commercial space has had challenges and had problems. We also know that it's filled with the most dynamic and brilliant and dedicated individuals around. And they're as frustrated as we are about sometimes the lack of progress. Tonight, I'd like to talk about solutions and not problems. I'd like to propose that there are three solutions to consider. I'd like to discuss these. The first solution I call public mandate. One way for us to open up space is to convince our government, or any government, to spend hundreds of billions of dollars over decades. But I contend that can only happen over the long term if there is a public mandate. The environmental movement has shown us one way to make that happen. How do we get a public mandate going? Something that will sustain the energy for the decades ahead. Anything less than public mandate will result in a start, stop, cancel mode that has been with us now for unfortunately a decade. What could galvanize the wallets and the votes of the average citizen? Psychologists tell us that there are two very basic motivations in the human brain that can do that: fear and curiosity. Human curiosity knows few bounds when a question as fundamental as "are we alone?" is concerned. The detection of life in the universe would take space as something that's exotic to something that's an obsession overnight. This is one option. Seated even deeper in the spirit is the human response to fear. President Kennedy's decision in 1961 to launch Apollo was triggered by Yuri Gagarin's flight on Vostok 1 in 1961, April 12th, and by a fiasco at the Bay of Pigs 1 week later. Ask yourself, what could equally create a shock in the system? Fear perhaps of extraterrestrial intelligence, or the danger of an impending collision with an asteroid? In fact, I go to sleep each and every night praying that an asteroid might come and head towards us. Not too soon, but a decade or so away. Perhaps it might be discovered that two major multinational Japanese corporations are in fact planning expeditions to the South Pole of the Moon to claim that territory, as I've heard from a friend and a reliable source. Regardless of whether you consider these ridiculous or serious or threats or not, it will take something on this level to galvanize a public mandate to drive such billion-dollar expenditures. The second solution I call the capitalist engine. So what if we're not alone in the universe and we don't have an asteroid barreling down on us? What could then take a lifeless, barren, distant environment and turn it into something that's alive and prosperous? We could look at Alaska as a great example. 150 years ago, Senator Seward made a deal and bought a wasteland. In fact, it was called Seward's Folly because people thought it was a ridiculous purchase. Until about 50 years later, when all of a sudden gold and oil and fish were discovered, and it became one of the most phenomenal returns on investment since Manhattan. In the 19th century, in the 1900s, Alaska went from being a desolate location valued by seal pelts to something which then had an active infrastructure for transportation and a tourism business, bar none. What sources can we find to fuel this, what I call exothermic economic reaction, that gives off more money than it consumes? But more importantly than finding just a product, we have to find something that involves people as well. Because unless it involves people, it doesn't matter, at least to me. The third solution I call changing the rules. If you can't win, change the rules. This solution is perhaps the most plausible in the near term. It involves making a fundamental change to the economics of spaceflight. We've all heard the buzzwords of cheaper, faster, better, and low-cost access. But that does not involve a reduction of operations of 20 or 50%. Today, it can be calculated that the cost of a single U.S. astronaut in orbit costs $27,000 per minute. A fundamental change does not mean a small reduction. It means orders of magnitude. Fundamental change means something that will get you and me into orbit as space adventurers or tourists, and not only as a lucky few who have worked a lifetime to go and fly. So how do we create that? We have two options. We can go, as has been traditional, with the government laying out you shall build this type of vehicle. And I do congratulate NASA and Golden for the X-33 program. That's fantastic. Or we can try something that has worked well in the past in the world of aviation, competitive prizes. I'd like to speak for a moment about a program very special to me called the X Prize, as a mechanism of bringing about innovation in space transportation, and thereby changing these rules. Prizes are nothing new to the aerospace world. In fact, in the early 20th century, between 1909 and 1929, there were over 100 major aviation prizes. Between 1926 and 1927, Daniel Guggenheim, many of you know his name as a wealthy entrepreneur, sponsored over $2.5 million in prizes, today worth $100 million. One of the best known prizes was the Orteig Prize, which Lindbergh won in 1927. The Orteig Prize was a $25,000 prize for the first person to fly nonstop from New York to Paris. $25,000 as a prize got $400,000 spent in attempts. 16 times the prize value was spent by a total of 9 competitors. And the beautiful thing was that when Orteig put up that prize money, he didn't have to pay one bloody red cent to any of the losers. He paid just the winners. It's also worth noting that our hero, Charles Lindbergh, back then was the underdog. He was the least expected to win. In fact, everyone sporting bimotor and trimotor airplanes failed miserably. Prizes work. Rather than have someone pick a winner, prizes use natural selection, something that we as humans have benefited from for a couple 100 million years, to drive the ideal designs. Space exploration development needs such prizes which excite you as space adventurers to go out there and compete for them. For the record, Lindbergh's flight was not a technological achievement. All the technology that Lindbergh needed to fly was available then. Just like all the technology you and I need to fly is available right now, today. Lindbergh's flight on the 20th of May, 1927, 68 years ago today, was fundamentally a socio-psychological achievement. The flight of the Spirit of St. Louis changed the mindset of everybody, that aeronautical flight, aviation, was not something just for a select few. It was for everyone. It changed their perspective. In fact, aviation stocks went flying through the roof after he flew. It's time for each of you to start becoming space heroes, like Lindbergh, and create a conscious shift that will open our frontier forever. Let's talk about space prizes. The X Prize is your opportunity to become a space adventurer. As I'll describe in a few minutes, the X Prize is a $5 million prize as a target for the first private effort to launch humans on a suborbital flight to 100 kilometers altitude. Before I discuss the prize rules, I'd like to state clearly that the purpose of the prize is to try and jumpstart space tourism and change the mindset of the general public that it's only for a small group. It's for anyone who wants to go and should be. It's my expectation that once the prize is funded, we'll have multiple events and multiple attempts. I've had numerous people, even in this audience, come up and saying, I'm getting a group ready to go and do this. And that's fantastic. While the X Prize will have one winner, it will have no losers. Everyone who puts together an effort and attempts to fly will begin then to recoup their money by taking their vehicle and providing rides. We'll have not one organization, but a multitude of people trying to fly people in suborbital flights. And like the history of prizes, once the first prize is set, the next one will come for orbital tourism. And from there we'll have Marriott and Hilton and Shimizu and Obayashi start building orbital hotels. We have to start someplace. Let's talk about the rules. The rules are extremely important in any prize. They guide the successful nature of any prize. And to put together those rules, we've invited a group of at least 25 very distinguished individuals to pound away and try and make them happen. Make the right rules. Not too hard, so it can't be won. Not too simple, so it's won tomorrow. I'd like to read some of those players. They include Arthur C. Clarke, Burt Rutan, the chairman of NSS, Buzz Aldrin, Eric Lindbergh, who's the grandson of Charles Lindbergh, Tom Rogers, Colonel Pete Worden, who brought you Clementine, Bill Gabatz, who brought you DCX, Jim Muncie from Senator Rohrabacher's office, Laurie Garber representing the National Space Society, Baron Lichtenberg representing the Association of Space Explorers, which, by the way, has unanimously backed the prize as an effort that they would like to help make happen. Rick Tomlinson representing the Space Frontier Foundation, Dick McLeod representing the U.S. Space Foundation, and Max Hunter, our U.S. committee member, and dozens of other individuals who have agreed and who have, over the last 6 months, helped to make this prize take a few baby steps forward. So, here are the draft rules, which continue to evolve. First, the spaceship must be privately financed and privately built. 2, the ship must be flown twice within a 2-week period of time. Each flight must carry a minimum of 2 humans to a minimum of 100-kilometer altitude. The ship must be built with the capacity, weight, and volume to carry at least 3 adults, though. The second flight must demonstrate a low per-flight cost and vehicle usability. Both crew and spaceship must return to Earth substantially unharmed on both trips. Entrants must specify their takeoff and landing location, and the spaceship must be brought to a controlled landing within 5 kilometers of the chosen landing site. The X Prize is international and open to anyone who abides by the rules. In summary, 100 kilometers, 2 people within 2 weeks. As I mentioned earlier, our target is a $5 million minimum purse. We'd like to raise it to $10 million. Traditionally, this money will comes from, as it did in the aviation world 70 years ago, from a wealthy individual, from the media, or from hotel owners, or Teague was a hotel owner. As the X Prize moves forward, we're focusing on 4 key areas. The first is continue refining the rules, and I welcome input from the community here. I really hope that this community will embrace this as your prize that you want to help make happen. 2, researching historical aviation prizes. We're researching that to get a database and understand what drove prizes. I'd like to thank Colette Bevis for taking that lead. 3, introducing legislation into Congress to make this prize both liability and tax-free. And for that, I thank Jim Muncie and NSS for the support and that leadership. And 4, most importantly, working on finding the money, getting the sponsor. And on that note, I'd like to publicly thank Tom Rogers, who has financially been supporting and sponsoring this effort from its inception. And Tom, we only wish you were a multi-billionaire so you could finance the whole prize yourself. I'd like to close now with another poem, one that I wrote myself, and which I dedicate to the spirit of this group in this session here today. I call it Just Do It. Has a dream ever struck your heart within and never let it go? Has your mind ever clutched a concept whole so you owned it from the start? When the passion mounts to unbearable odds to make your soul explode, then it's time for you to take that step. It's time to do your part. Have you ever awoke before the dawn, your mind so keen and sharp? Have you ever missed the night go by and worked till morning's light? When the world around matters less and less, and the worries are all far gone, then it's time for you to take that step. It's time to mount that fight. When the projects feel oh so close, yet light years far away. When you wonder from where the means will come to do the things you do. When you wonder how and where and why, just stop and think this thought. The time has come to question not, just do it for you. Have you ever wondered where the heroes went? The ones who sewed no walls, those magic people who did not know they broke the rules day by day. When society has shackled your dreams and fit you in their box, then it's time to shout out loud, no, your laws I won't obey. Have you ever sought to find that place where no one else has gone? That magic path between sight and sound that's plowed on virgin snow? When that last frontier has passed you by and you wallow in your loss, then the time has come to shout out loud, forward, forward I must go. And when all the plans are said and done and talk will serve no more, and the fear of action from deep within strikes panic in your heart, then the time has come at last when excuses are all far gone. Take courage, my friend, and scream it loud. Just do it. Time to start. Thank you.
I think you'll agree with me, a great idea, great address. And now for another surprise. Repeat after me. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Peter. Happy birthday to you. And my annual statement of chagrin for those of you who are not members. You can still join, there's still time. And let me mention one more thing before I move right along. I am very excited about the renewed concept of a prize to achieve new technological wonders, as Peter has so adroitly brought to our attention in this address tonight. And I just want to I think, remind you, I tell maybe some of you for the first time, if you're not aware of it, but just yesterday at this conference, you heard, following a presentation, some words from an individual whose company, he stated, in so many words, could very likely be the first contender for this X Prize. Antonio Elias, the Vice President for Engineering, I think that title is right, at Orbital Sciences, said in response to a question over his presentation that yes, this X-34, we intend to evolve it to fly people. Let me step right along to some awards tonight. Let me introduce our U.S. Chapters Coordinator, Shirley Smith, and Vice President for Chapters and Board Member Craig Ward for presentation of Chapter Excellence, Special Merit, and Meritorious Service Awards.
Good evening. My name is Craig Ward. I'm the Chapters Coordinator and Vice President for Chapters. I am assisted in this task by U.S. Chapters Coordinator Shirley Smith and International Chapters Coordinator Kirby Eichen. What that really means is that I'm the figurehead and they do all the work. One of the results of all the work they've been doing with chapters is that we are now learning more about what chapters are actually doing out in the field. And in recognition of that, we have reorganized the awards somewhat this year, and they're going to now recognize the great variety and the quality of these activities. So for the first award, it's presented to the Space Frontier Society of New York City for community service. And they put on an educators conference in their town. Someone from New York?
Actually, the conference doesn't please come up. This is her award.
The Excellence Award for Service to the Society is presented to the San Diego L5. They helped NSS put on the International Space Enterprise Conference on Return to the Moon last fall. We have SDL5. For the Excellence Award for Primary Education is going to the NSS Southwest Michigan chapter for their Kids Space at the Kalamazoo Air Show. We will hand it on to them at a later time.
Okay, the next Excellence Award, Chapter Excellence Award, is for Central Savannah River NSS for their youth education, in recognition of their sponsorship of the Evans High School chapter. They started a new auxiliary chapter of NSS in a high school, and I work with them very much. I'd like for their friends, there aren't any representatives from Central Savannah, but one of their sister chapters in Georgia is here. Greg is here to accept the award for them. There he is. For public education, another area of education, Huntsville, Alabama, L5 Society, in recognition of their public lecture series. The next is the Explorer Award. This is the only one that isn't self-explanatory. It means that for this award, someone had to do something inspiring for other people to explore the world around them or the unknown around them. This award goes to Illini in recognition for their work in presenting space tourism to the public. Illini Space Society. I'm going to ask at this time for Scott McLaren to please stand. I can tell by your response that you already know that This man has been behind the Illini chapter for many years, and as a result has kept the chapter with a very strong NSS identity, with some great kids working with him there.
The next Chapter Excellence Award is presented to the Southeast Texas Space Initiative for publicity in recognition of their sponsorship of local space-related radio programming. The Chapter Excellence Award for a newsletter is presented to the NSS Boston chapter in recognition of their publication of the electronic and paper editions of Space Views. Publication which, by the way, you'll be seeing more of in the future on a larger basis. The next Chapter Excellence Award is for media, and it is presented to the Middle Tennessee Space Society in recognition of their space TV and space news.
The last of the Excellence Awards is going to the Orange County Space Society. This will be the 1995 Chapter of the Year.
A lot of juggling around to do this fairly. The next series of awards is the Special Merit Awards. The most exciting thing about the chapter awards this year is that we didn't have to scramble around looking for who was really outstanding. This year there were so many outstanding events sponsored by chapters that the difficulty was actually choosing which one of the candidates got which awards. That was wonderful, a great experience. So this year we have another category called Special Merit Awards. All of the chapters in this category were actually candidates for the Excellence Awards, and they have outstanding records in events and special promotion of our goals out in the communities. The first one goes to Albuquerque, NSS, for Northwest New Mexico Science Fair Judging. And we will give that to them later. Oasis Chapter for Public Lecture Series and Shoemaker Levy Event at JPL. NSS of North Texas for Space Week in the Science Place in Dallas. Metro Orlando Space Society for colonizing the Tallahassee Perspatium Chapter. Baltimore Metro Chapter for the Apollo 25th anniversary with the Maryland Science Center.
And if you're wondering why we keep swapping around up here, it's a slight anomaly that we don't actually have any international chapters being represented this evening. Yet I would like to point out that we do actually have not only Canadians in the audience here, but we also, I believe, have a couple of fellow Australians here in the audience. So I'm hoping that at next year's awards, we're going to have the opportunity to be presenting a number of international awards. But I will continue with the US awards. We have the Oklahoma Space Alliance for hosting the 1995 Southwest Regional Conference. The Minnesota Frontier Society for their BBS service. the Heart of America chapter for Space Week display at Wonderscope Children's Museum. The NSS Southwestern Michigan for their 4th annual Kids Space exhibit at the Kalamazoo Air Show. And Northeastern Pennsylvania Space Foundation for their high school petition drive.
As we said, this year there was a lot of stuff to look at and a lot of really great activities going on out there. We will also be giving Meritorious Service Awards to the following chapters. Central New York chapter for their work on the Northeast Space Development Conference, the Iowa State Space Society for their sponsorship of the Mid-Continent Space Development Conference, Zero's G Destiny for their rocket launch picnic, the Northeast Georgia for promoting the NSS Star Trek PSAs, the Central Savannah River chapter for the Apollo 25th anniversary media outreach, the Chicago Society for Space Studies for their annual rocket launch event, the First Arkansas chapter of NSS for their sponsorship of the Astronomy Day at Arkansas Technical University, Tucson Space Society for their Space Week activities, Houston Clear Lake area NSS for fundraising activities benefiting a local school board's space bus, the Austin Space Frontier Society for their Harvard Graphics slideshow on solar power satellites, Sacramento L5 Society for their Sunrise Mall outreach activity, the Langley Space Society for their rocket design and launch program for local schools, the Suffolk Challengers for Space producing a track on social benefits of space for a science fiction convention at the State University of New York, Stony Brook, the North Coast chapter of NSS for their booth at the Erie International Air Show, the Hawaii Space Society for their public lecture series, the San Antonio Space Society for their Race to Space, and the Cuyahoga Valley Space Society for their ISDC 95.
I'd apologize to my good friend Kirby Eichen for not introducing him. I wasn't told that it was going to be an international event, even though. Now let me introduce the National Space Society's Executive Director, Lori Garber, for presentation of Headquarters Volunteer Service Awards.
Thank you, Charlie. Obviously, the awards that have just been given are also volunteer service awards. The way we distinguish the volunteer service awards from headquarters is that annually, on behalf of the staff, we started giving an award to the volunteer of the year. This was something that started in the L5 days in Tucson, where someone would actually come into the office. We don't have people coming into the office anymore, as you'll see from this year's awards. Primarily now we're on electronic mail, and through that media we are able to get many more volunteers. So I'm actually giving 5 awards this year. And in fact, most of the people aren't physically here because they're all conferencing online somewhere. So the award, the actual physical award for the headquarters volunteer service is going to come from Dave's Closet at headquarters. Really neat stuff, he tells me. So if you've ever seen Dave's Closet at headquarters, these people are going to get something great. The first award, if you could please stand, this person is here. He is getting an award for his outstanding and professional editorial work on our newest publication, the Society Information and Activist Newsletter, Inside NSS. Jeff Liss, please stand. Jeff hadn't stepped up and said he was going to take on a newsletter. Guess who was going to do it? The next awards, the people aren't here, and they're all for online work. First, we have Bruce Altner of Landover, Maryland, for his donation through his employer, AR Internet Corporation, of internet access, an account for headquarters, and a World Wide Web homepage on our Return to the Moon campaign. The second is to Bev Freed of Dallas, Texas, for her outstanding efforts in making NSS the preeminent space advocacy organization in cyberspace, if we do say so ourselves. Bev developed and manages the NSS homepage on the World Wide Web. She operates several email lists and continues to operate the NSS BBS. Ed Cameron of Grand Bills, Maryland, for his work in setting up and managing the library section in the NSS Forum on America Online. And Ken Bullock of Raleigh, North Carolina, for his management of several of the NSS email lists. Again, thanks to all our volunteers. There's many of you, and we hope to be giving even more of these awards in the future, and all the chapter awards. Thanks very much.
And now let me introduce the Chapters Assembly Chairman, Ronnie LaJoy, for presentation of the Chapters Assembly Administrative Council's Chapter Activist Award. Ronnie?
Good evening, fellow space enthusiasts. My name is Ronnie LaJoy. I am the new chairman of the NSS Chapters Assembly Administrative Council. First, I would like to thank the past chairman, David Anderman, for providing bold leadership to the Chapters Assembly for the past 2 years. I would also like to thank Teresa Holmes for serving as registrar and John Strickland for serving as secretary. David, Teresa, John, could you stand and be recognized, please? Second, I would like to inform the members of the Chapters Assembly and associated working groups that I will be disseminating information and coordinating activities via the internet and inside NSS in more direct means as the needs arise. Tonight, it is my honor to present the award for Outstanding Chapter Activist of 1994. This award recognizes the member of an NSS chapter who has worked hardest to achieve the vision of the National Space Society through our NSS chapter system. This year, that award goes to Alan Scherzer of the Ann Arbor Space Society. Last year, and for many previously, Alan served as the whip for the NSS chapters in support of the DCX and the single stage to orbit programs. Alan has also written a nationally distributed column called One Small Step for a Space Activist. He currently serves as the chair of the Chapters Assembly Policy Committee. Alan also has pioneered the use of the internet for space activist communication. For all these reasons, I am proud to present Alan with the award for Outstanding Chapter Activist for this year. Alan, are you here? He's not. He's working. That's too bad. Is there someone from Ann Arbor to accept the award on his behalf? No. Well, let me sweeten the pot. Maybe this will help. Alan, or your representative, in appreciation of all your efforts and to encourage others to work as hard as you, I am also proud to present your chapter, the Ann Arbor Space Society, with this check for $100.
If I knew this group was so rich that nobody runs up for a $100 check, I'd be asking you for more in the way of contributions. Expect it. You know, sometimes you have these aha moments when you hear a word, just a word. It'll bring something that Ronnie just said. Just gave me this start. It's going to happen. We have such devoted, dedicated, hardworking, and intelligent individuals focused on electronic information transmission, our computer-based bulletin boards and World Wide Web pages. What just came to me was it'll be no time at all before the National Space Society has a computer with artificial intelligence that is going to be the first computer with artificial dissemination. Moving right along, I want to introduce yeah, somebody said that, yeah, I still eating too much chocolate. There's still some left on the table. Lynn, Alan's here to collect his $100 check. Alan's seen Ronnie, he's trying to spend it. Heck yes, come on up here.
Well, I left my speech behind, so we'll just announce one more time, since you weren't here, that you have been elected the Outstanding Chapter Activist of 1994. With a check for $100.
I don't get it? Okay, well, it's not much point in that then. Well, obviously I'm very surprised, otherwise I would have been here. So. But thank you very much.
Listen, Alan, I saw you eyeing those awards down there. This year it's $100. Next year it might be one of those awards. Keep up the good work, okay? Let me introduce now to present the Outstanding Service Awards for Space Cause and Space PAC, and say a few words about our immediate objectives in Washington. One of my most immediate objectives in Washington is to get out of town as often as possible. But let me introduce Mark Hopkins, Executive Vice President for the National Space Society, President of Space Cause, and Chairman of Space PAC.
Each year, Space PAC gives one award, not to be confused with National Space Society, just one award. And this is for outstanding service for that year. And it's chosen by the board of directors, and the constraint on it is the winner can't be on the board or an officer. And the individual who obtained this award for this year obtained it partly because he raised a substantial amount of money for PAC during the last election. He's also the Georgia State Coordinator for Space PAC. He's the President of the NSS Northeast Georgia Chapter, and he's also an insurance underwriter who has a vision of someday writing insurance for satellites. I told him to talk to Kirby. Anyway, his name is Greg Rucker.
Less said the better. Let's get on with it.
The second award, which I have the pleasure to present tonight, is the Space Cause Award for Outstanding Achievement for this year. And this goes to an individual who is a frequent volunteer at the Space Cause office in Washington, D.C. He has done a large number of projects for Space Cause during the last year, including such things as research into what would be appropriate rents, research into fax equipment, research into software, work on the phone bank, hitting various congressional districts with phone calls and things during key periods. He's also done a lot of photography for Space Cause at various events. He's a frequent financial contributor, which is always a big plus as far as I'm concerned. And also he's an aerospace engineer at Goddard and the Space Cause National Phone Tree Coordinator. Now, he's not here tonight. And a little story behind that. I asked him, you're this big activist, how come you're not going to come to the ISDC? And he gave me what I thought was sort of not so great excuse. He's something about a much postponed honeymoon in Europe. Anyway, I've asked the editor of Space Cause News, to which Greg Wharton, who's this guy's name, has contributed numerous articles, to come up and accept the award for him, and that's very enticing. I'm going to talk a little about our immediate objective in Washington. As I think almost everybody in the room knows, last year there was this probe that went to the moon called Clementine. And one of the things that this probe did was find some tantalizing evidence that there might be water on the moon. And indeed, according to the grapevine and various rumors that one picks up, there is some belief that there will be publications forthcoming in the not too distant future which make a much stronger case that there is water on the moon based on Clementine data than has been done heretofore. However, there is still, even with this analysis, considerable uncertainty as to whether it's true or not. So we need another probe, this time designed to answer that question, to find out if there's water on the moon. Why? If there is water on the moon, it dramatically alters the economics of doing anything which involves the moon and more generally space industrialization, at least in far orbit space industrialization. And that's because you can get from water such things as rocket fuel by disassociating into hydrogen and oxygen. And if you have rocket fuel for flights, return flights from the moon back to the Earth, rather than having to bring all the fuel all the way up to the moon in order to bring it all the way back, it dramatically affects the economics in ways which makes anything you do on the moon better. And that, as far as we are concerned, means that the time level, the time at which these sorts of events will occur will be much sooner than would otherwise be the case. Now, NASA has proposed a probe, which is in this year's budget, called Lunar Prospector. It's very inexpensive, only $63 million, which is very cheap for a planetary probe. Unfortunately, because of the general problem in Washington currently with all budgets, and NASA budgets in particular, Congressman Sensenbrenner, who is chairman of the Authorization Subcommittee in the House, which deals with NASA, has said no new stars. And he said that a couple months ago, and we've been pounding him ever since with letters and phone calls, particularly with a lot of help from our chapter in Wisconsin, which is effectively in his district. And I've also been walking around the halls of Congress talking to various people such as Sensenbrenner and the chair of the full committee, Walker, and the minority leader of the full committee, Braun, and Mikulski, and a large number of meetings with their various staffers. And according to the latest information I have, which comes from his chief of staff of the subcommittee, which I talked to Wednesday night, there's about a 50-50 chance that he's going to approve this thing. And I'd like that to be a lot higher probability. Now we have roughly into mid-June. It's not nailed down completely as to when this vote's going to be. So when you go home, if you could write a letter or make a phone call to Congressman Sensenbrenner, this would be very useful and have a reasonable chance of making a serious difference in when we have a spacefaring civilization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. The microphone always sticks me in the eye after he talks. And it's a 1G problem. Mike's not back there. He would really understand that when he died.
He didn't have a UCD on.
That's a private joke, folks. Okay. Getting right along with the evening, let me introduce the presenter of the second Wernher von Braun Memorial Award. And to make the presentation, I will introduce Vice President of the National Space Society and Executive Director Emeritus, Dr. Glen P. Wilson.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Some months ago, I submitted my nomination for the Von Braun Award to the selection committee headed by Fred Ordway. To my delight, my candidate was selected unanimously. I am therefore pleased tonight to substitute for Fred Ordway, who couldn't be here tonight, to present our second Von Braun Memorial Award to Maxwell W. Hunter. Let me just tell you a little bit about Max, and then you'll understand why the selection committee had an easy choice. Mr. Hunter was selected in recognition of lifetime contributions to the fields of rockets, missiles, and spaceflight. He was, in 1946, how many of you can remember that, charge of missile aerodynamics at Douglas Aircraft during the early development of the Nike surface-to-air missile, the Sparrow air-to-air missile, the Honest John artillery rocket, the Genie air-to-air rocket, and other systems. In other words, he started off his career in rocketry. He was the principal designer of the Air Force Thor intermediate range ballistic missile in the late 1950s, which quickly became the workhorse civilian Thor Delta and later the Delta launch vehicle. As of May 1995, 227 Deltas have been successfully launched. The last failure occurred in May of 1986. Counting from September 1977, there have been only 2 failures in 93 flights for a 98% success achievement. No other American launch vehicle can even come close to that record. During the Thor years, he became acquainted with Wernher von Braun, whose team was then developing the competitive Jupiter IR BM. During the Apollo Saturn years, Max worked on the Saturn S4 and S4B stages for von Braun, with whom he became a friend and colleague. I persuaded Max to tell you, when he gets the microphone, a few stories about his personal friendship with Wernher von Braun, and he'll be doing that in just a few minutes. Max Hunter exhibited managerial and planning skills in a different arena during the 1960s when he served in the newly activated National Aeronautics and Space Council. At that time, I was on the staff of the Senate Aeronautical and Space Sciences Committee, and that's when I first met and came to know Max Hunter. That's 33 years ago, friends. While there, he helped guide national decision makers through the heady Apollo years, and while on the council, he redefined the deep space exploration program through an understanding of planetary flight mechanics, especially in the recognition of the role of planetary gravity fields in reducing the rocket impulse required. He was the first to recognize the tremendous impact of gravity boost given by the giant planets, especially Jupiter, to spacecraft following escape trajectories out of the solar system and out of their ecliptic missions and approaching closely to the sun. As you are all aware, this technique is used now in almost all of our outer planets missions. Back in 1962, President Kennedy asked the Council to make suggestions for a speech that he, the President, was going to give at Rice University in Houston that September. It was Max Hunter who proposed the term spacefaring nation. There's a nice long story to this, but I'll shorten it up. The proposal filtered its way up to the President, who liked it and inserted it into that ringing speech where he said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade," and so forth and so forth. Spacefaring nation. Late in the decade, Max expanded on earlier achievements as designer and advocate of advanced space systems with concepts such as the gas core nuclear engines, the liquid fluorine high-performance Starlet vehicle, the Star Clipper, which was the precursor to the space shuttle, and the Large Space Telescope. Many people don't know that Max was the original designer of the Large Space Telescope, which is now known as the Hubble Space Telescope. Let me get my notes here. It was Max Hunter who decided that there must be a better way to protect our country than the MAD, or Mutually Assured Destruction program, that we had back in those years. And it was Max who invented what came to be known as the Star Wars program. Both Businessweek and Newsweek publicly declared him to be the father of Star Wars. This program has widely been touted as the, quote, straw that broke the camel's back in the demise of the Soviet Union and the end of communism. So it's not stretching the facts too far to say that Max Hunter was also responsible for the end of the Cold War. I told you I was going to sneak that in there, Max. Despite all of these outstanding accomplishments, Max Hunter's most important achievement may lie in the future. It is as the originator and dogged proponent of the single-stage-to-orbit launch system that he may gain his greatest fame. His 1988 paper, entitled The SSX Spaceship Experimental, led directly to the development of the DCX and its potential to reduce launch costs by 2 orders of magnitude. Max Hunter's name will be remembered as long as spacecraft are flying and space frontiers are being explored. So I'm delighted to make this presentation of to this extraordinary man and space pioneer, Max Hunter, The award is a replica of one of von Braun's rocket designs. Max. You will always have a chance to tell your grandchildren someday that you actually met the great Max.
Well, I'm not used to people saying good things about me. In fact, quite the contrary. I'm going to hold it for a second. I don't know what to say in addition to what Glen said, except to add that on the seventh day I rested. The reason I wanted to hold on this to a minute, David, is for those of you who are too young to know, this is not a single-stage to orbit rocket. It is also not a wingless rocket. So, in fact, we have the burning ones. Well, as Glenn said, he harassed me to come up with some recollections of Wernher. And there's got to be a couple hundred somewhere in my brain, but I can only think of one or two. And partly because he and I had a pretty similar outlook on things, so we didn't fight very much. Our first, when I first got to know him, of course, we were rivals. I was doing the Thor, and he and his guys at Huntsville were doing the Jupiter. And that was a violent political controversy between the Air Force and the Army. What almost nobody knew at the time, there was a relatively close relation between the two engineering teams, because we were both out there moving in a hurry. Weren't really quite sure what the hell we were doing. And when we got into trouble or they got into trouble, we traded data. And sometimes the next morning. And I'm not sure the Army and the Air Force ever knew that. So when it came time to do the Saturn, and we had some considerable discussions at Douglas as to whether to bid on this, because how in the hell could you expect to sell the Thor team to the Jupiter team? But some of us figured the management would make us bid anyway, which I'm sure they would have. And so we worked a problem, and at least we knew that there were more cordial relations than anyone else. In fact, I always had the impression the other companies thought we were absolutely nuts for bidding that. We operated almost invisibly, because nobody considered the Douglas move credible. And we counted on that. And we wound up winning the contract. Now, Wernher had probably a better feel for the bureaucracy than I had then. And one of the things that I always remembered about him, after we went on from the Saturn S4 to the S4B, which was the upper stage of the lunar rocket to Saturn V. And my guys on anything new would always go out and try to understand the whole rocket from nose to tail. And they started coming in and telling me, those guys are all screwed up. I said, why? Well, their weights are all wrong, their volumes are wrong. They got a huge all-H volume in the second stage. My God, they could put another 1 million pounds of propellant in there. This is ridiculous. And I told them I thought that was a lousy analysis and go back, and they kept persisting that no, we looked at it from nose to tail. What the hell's going on? So I called up Wernher and told him that the viewpoint of my people. His reply was, okay, you caught us. He said, I'll tell you what's going on, but you and your guys keep quiet. And he said, In those days, the plan was to throw only about 40,000 or 45,000 pounds to the moon. And that was the number that Houston was using. And Wernher said, I don't think they can do it for anywhere near that. He said in about another 6 months or a year, they're going to have to come to their senses. They're going to have about double the weight we need to throw to the moon, and we're going to be prepared. And you shut up. So I said, okay, sir. And I called in the guys and said, okay, you got it right, but here's where we keep quiet. I said, furthermore, you go take our S4V and you run a quick analysis on just what in the heck happens if we have to carry double payload because of what he does to the lower stages. And if the Jupiter team is going to anticipate this, I'll be damned if the Thor team is going to screw it up. And sure enough, somewhere in X months, I don't remember now how many, there was a big meeting at NASA. Houston came up and said they needed to just about double the throw weight, and the whole Saturn V was sitting there anticipating that. And that was a very interesting thing as far as I was concerned. I also enjoyed the other bureaucratic lesson. He wrapped NASA headquarters for another $400 million to upgrade to Saturn V. We get very quiet about that one too. Another one, philosophical point, and I only have two really little stories, but another piece of philosophy that I thought was absolutely fabulous. It was an Air Force Scientific Advisory Board meeting at Woods Hole in somewhere along about 1972. It was after the shuttle program was underway. And I don't remember the gist of the conversation, but somebody asked Wernher what he thought about the shuttle. And he came up with the following piece of philosophy. He said, when a program as big as the shuttle gets started, it's like crossing a river in a rowboat with an elephant. He said, when he rocks, you rock. When he doesn't rock, you don't rock. If you want to rock the boat, you wait till you get to the other side and get that elephant out of there. And it happened to agree with my philosophy. I had never expressed it that eloquently. But when you get a big program going, if you think they're doing it wrong in the first few years, you just break your peg and you just get destroyed if you try to change it. You got to give it time, let it get settled. You can get it later. But you got to be careful in your timing as you're going to try to do these things. And I always thought his description of the elephant in the rowboat was an excellent way to say that. And I'll tell you only one other story. He was a real charmer. And I'll tell you, following that guy around at a cocktail party was very degrading. He was out, again, this was early in the shuttle program. He was out paying a visit to Ames. I was at Lockheed at the time. And so he called me up, and we wanted to go out that evening because he was trying to hire me for his group, and he was in NASA headquarters at the time. And so we got together, we went home, had a few drinks with my wife, and headed off to the Blue Fox restaurant. Now, for those of you who might know my wife, she's a retired movie star named Irene Manning, and is in general not impressed with any man on the planet. But at any time she would call up and make a reservation to the restaurant, if it was in my world of space, it was always in the name of Maxwell Hunter, but if it was in her world of show business, it was always Irene Manning. That's the only time that Irene ever picked up the phone, talked to the Blue Fox, made a reservation in the name of Wernher von Braun. Now that was okay. And the Blue Fox in San Francisco is a very good restaurant, continental restaurant, very sophisticated, not sauerkraut type restaurant. What I didn't know, the entire staff were German derivatives. And Wernher and I walked in there and it was a shambles all night long. I mean, they were just all over us. And that's how I found out the Blue Box was a German restaurant. But it was interesting to watch the guy's interaction with people. He was far better at it than I ever was. So I'm very honored to get this award. I kind of miss the guy, frankly. He had an excellent feel for how you get things done. And that had a lot to do with, I think, how we did some of the things we did. Thank you.
Max, I have to say that I have to repeat a word that went around our table just as you were finishing your wonderful recollections and remarks, in which you just concluded by saying that Dr. von Braun all knew how to get things done and knew what were the right things to do. And I've got to say, so do you. Thank you. Let me go to the last awards for the evening. I want to present the Space Pioneer Awards. They are selected by the National Space Society Awards Committee from member nominations and are presented each year to individuals or organizations who have done groundbreaking work in the opening of the space frontier. The Space Pioneer Award for Special Merit has been presented to Lieutenant General Daniel O. Graham, U.S. Army retired. This award is in many ways overdue. General Graham has been a leader for many years in promoting the development of the space frontier, primarily through lowering the cost of access to space. Many people think of ballistic missile defense when they think of Daniel Graham or his organization High Frontier, but the economic development of space and a healthy U.S. aerospace industry have always been in the forefront of his thinking. The emphasis lately has been there on reducing the cost of space access and promoting efficiency, which has led to efforts like the X-33 today. General Graham saw the need for this long ago, while many others were trying to fit things into the existing expensive infrastructure. In fact, this shift of attitudes is largely due to his work on the Citizens Advisory Committee on Space, which among other things resulted in the very effective Ballistic Missile Defense Organization's single-stage rocket technology program. The key role he played in these efforts has helped to bring about a revolution in the way that the entire United States space community views space and itself. And these actions will be remembered for generations to come. For these reasons, we are pleased to have presented the Executive Vice President of the National Space Society, Scott Pace, and Lori Garver, our Executive Director, to have had the opportunity to present this award last week to General Graham at his home where he is convalescing. The Space Pioneer Award for Return to the Moon was presented to Dr. Mark J. Albrecht this morning. This award is in a new category created this year to coincide with the initiation of the National Space Society's Return to the Moon campaign. The Return to the Moon Award is given to the person or organization that has contributed the most towards humanity's return to the moon. Dr. Albrecht was chosen for his prior efforts as Executive Secretary of the National Space Council, in which he made a case for and successfully convinced then President of the United States, George Bush, to articulate a return to the moon as the next milestone in our space program. The goal of the Space Exploration Initiative, SEI as it came to be known, continues to resonate within space policy circles today, largely because of this man's efforts. Although not remaining as a program as such, SEI lives, but don't tell them in Washington, D.C. But it does live in the Defense Department's Clementine program, the Lunar Prospector Discovery Program at NASA, and numerous robotic Mars spacecraft. Dr. Albrecht was personally responsible for starting a revolution at our nation's civilian space agency, beginning with the nomination of Dan Golden to be NASA administrator. During Mark's tenure at the Space Council, he fought hard and won to a large extent for more emphasis on commercial programs and cheaper access to space, both ultimately necessary for our return to the moon. Since leaving government service, Mark has served as the National Space Society Vice President and has chaired our Aerospace Industry Advisory Council, helping us raise money, providing valuable insights, advice, and contacts. For these efforts, we're pleased to have presented the Space Pioneer Award to Mr. Cheaper, Better, Faster himself, Dr. Mark Albrecht. And the Space Pioneer Award for Mass Media goes to Glen Heinmiller. And this award is given to a person of organization that has been successful at attracting the attention of a large segment of the population, thereby raising general consciousness of space development and about space issues. Glen Heinmiller has been instrumental in revitalizing the National Space Society Forum on the America Online service. Thanks to his efforts, we can communicate our message to a growing audience, not only of National Space Society members, but also to a new and untapped market, the rapidly expanding network of 2.5 million America Online members. As a grassroots organization, we need to find ways to communicate with our members and effectively promote space development with a decentralized effort. Glen's work has been very helpful doing exactly that. Due almost entirely to his efforts, we recently signed a contract with AOL to host the National Space Society Forum, and the National Space Society Forum now has better features, offers faster service, and is a better value to National Space Society members and online visitors than what was available last year at this time. Glen first logged into the existing NSS forum more than a year ago, and as a concerned member saw a need and stepped in to volunteer many hours in this self-initiated effort. We can now use our access to this extremely popular online service to communicate news and information to fellow members, chapters, and interested people several times more effectively than ever before. Glen, not being able to be with us tonight, will be presented the award in the near future. And finally, the Space Pioneer Award for Activist of the Year. The Activist of the Year award goes to that National Space Society member who has made important contributions to the NSS or the development of a spacefaring civilization in the past year or throughout their life. This year's Space Activist of the Year award is presented to Charles E. Miller. Presented to Charles for initiating and supporting the March 1995 seminar, Space Policy for the 21st Century. Charles was instrumental in causing this successful seminar to happen. He worked with congressional staffers to interest them in holding the event and helped get volunteers and speakers. He also arranged for volunteers to make over 50 congressional visits the following week in Washington, especially focusing on reusable launch vehicle efforts and the Space Data Purchase Act. Materials that Charles helped develop were used by activists to brief members and are still available to brief members of Congress, staff, and the public. For those of us who attended the seminar, it was a thrill to see Representative and Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, deliver his first space policy speech since becoming Speaker of the House of Representatives. And for those who have read the transcript, seen a videotape of the event, or have seen it on Dan Rather's CBS Evening News coverage, can attest the Speaker's appearance helped to establish space policy goals early in the first 100 days of the 104th Congress. The importance of this to all of us in the space advocacy movement cannot be overlooked. The seminar helped to cement the important role that NSS and other grassroots space advocacy groups can and do play in setting the space policy agenda. Charles, as an individual, single-handedly did more than anyone else, including many organizational efforts, to raise the issue of space on the congressional agenda. For his achievements in promoting a more politically active National Space Society membership, we are pleased to present this year's Space Pioneer Award for Activist of the Year to Charles E.
Thanks a lot, Charlie. Well, I don't know what to say now. I guess I'd like to first start out and just thank everybody else who's been part of this effort. You know, one person gets to get up here, get an award. The NSS headquarters did a hell of a lot of work in the month or two before we put on the seminar. The Space Frontier Foundation helped with the briefings, and in particular, I know there's a number of these people here tonight. There was people who took vacation time, bought their plane tickets, paid for the hotel fare, and came to Washington, D.C. to meet me and to brief 55 members of Congress and staff. And I'd just like them to stand up for a second. Ben Muniz, David Anderman, Joe Gillen, Ransom Wooler, see here, Mike Kenny, and I think it's Dennis Wingle. Are you here? And that's all I've seen were the people here, but these people deserve this just as much as I do. And what I'm really hoping is this is the dawn of a new era for space activism. There's a revolution in Washington, D.C. that's apparent on the news, but I think the real revolution for us is the responsibility that activists are taking for making our voice heard in Washington, D.C., and that this will happen again and again, and each time it will be better. And so, thank you, God bless you, and I want to go. Thanks.
And lastly, but certainly not least of all, I want to thank personally, and I encourage you to take every opportunity to thank the organizers here in Cleveland, to thank Cleveland, to thank Jim and Annette Wood and Pam Hoffman for this year's event. I know that they will tell you, and you certainly know, that it wasn't just them, although they may have been the most visible and taken both the most heat and certainly took the most applause at the moment, but they were only the most visible individuals in a group of dedicated and giving volunteers. So our thanks to all of them. And now, get ready for the Big Apple. And I want to invite Greg Zsidisin to come up and tell you a little bit about next year, New York City.
Thank you, Charlie. Just one quick thing. Can all the people here from the Space Frontier Society of New York please come up to the front? I'd appreciate that. You know who you are. While they're doing that, I do want to say I want to add to that last bit of applause. I greatly appreciate Annette and Pam's and their teams lending of some wonderful new sensibilities to the ISDC. I think they've done a terrific job, especially tonight, and I thank you guys. It was really great. I won't take too much more of your time. I do want to tell you that we are very excited about bringing the conference to New York City. We were able to secure a hotel with very inexpensive rates for New York City, and I think generally inexpensive rates. And we're really looking forward to a very significant and wonderful event. Two quick things we'll do, and then we'll let you be. First thing is that we were going to do a long raffle, and we'll cut that short. I just want to give away the grand prize to the raffle. We had basically asked people to fill out surveys. They did so in large numbers. I do want to give away the grand prize, which is a 3D puzzle of the Empire State Building, just a subtle hint. So Sam, if you will, actually Seth, you're close. Dr. Seth Potter is...
And the winner is? Greg, you want to read it?
The winner is Michael Gilbrook from the...
That was not planned.
What you don't know is there's 475 surveys in there with our name on it.
That's what we get for having them help with the table. It's been a long evening of serious talk, subtle music, heavy dessert. And so it's with great pleasure that I tell you that in my right hand I have tonight's top 10 list. ISDC 96, top 10 reasons to come to ISDC 96 is written by Sam Leibowitz.
We want to start a tradition here. And guys from the New York chapter, Greg's making me do this. Okay, so top 10 reasons to come to ISDC in New York City in 1996. Number 10, Captain Video Reruns at the Museum of Television and Radio. Number 9, stargazing in Central Park. Number 8, crash the wild toga cocktail party at Alan Watts's place. Number 7, your stupid human trick for David Letterman is finally ready. And number 6, come study the latest generation of rockets. And number 5, Seth Potter's favorite, power beaming from the top of the World Trade Center. Number 4, Cats is going to close any day now. Number 3, seeing New York City has been your dream ever since the Muppets Take Manhattan. And number 2, live dangerously. Wear a Greenpeace shirt to Rush Limbaugh taping. And the number 1 reason, there we go, get some momentum there. The logical place for the ISDC is the center of the universe. And I send my personal invitation and the chapter's invitation to each and every person here to come next year to ISDC. Thank you.
Thank you, New does end this part of the evening, so I'm sure there's still going to be wild dancing in the halls, and no, I guess not. Looks like we wore you out. We wore you out. We did it. Okay, this is it, but just for tonight. Still a half day tomorrow. Come back, enjoy the sessions tomorrow. Ride the elevators safe tonight. See you in the morning. Thank you all very much.